Picture yourself 30,000 feet above the Atlantic. The steady drone of engines fills the cabin when suddenly the intercom crackles. The captain's voice breaks the calm. "Ladies and gentlemen, if there is a combat pilot on board, please identify yourself immediately." Forks freeze midair. Conversations cut off, hearts skip. The tension is sharp enough to taste. In seat 8A, a woman in a green sweater stirs, still half asleep, unaware that the quiet life she's tried to build is about to be exposed before a plane full of strangers. This isn't turbulence. This isn't routine travel. This is the kind of moment that drags hidden truths into the open. And if you're hearing this, buckle in, because this flight is about to test every nerve. She had chosen this route for its anonymity, a long, uneventful stretch between New York and London, a chance to bury herself in the comfort of a sweater that smelled faintly of home, sink into her seat, and vanish into the crowd like any other exhausted traveler. Her name was Captain Mara Dalton, though no one here knew her as that anymore. To them, she was just a dark-haired woman with tired eyes. Once, she'd flown combat missions, survived sleepless deployments, made impossible choices at 40,000 feet. Now, she only wanted rest. The chatter of businessmen, the soft wail of a baby, the clack of keys from a laptop across the aisle, all of it faded as she closed her eyes. For the first time in months, she wasn't responsible for anyone's life but her own. But fate has a way of finding those who think they've slipped free. And somewhere over the ocean, it found her again. The captain's voice returned, tight with controlled urgency. "We are facing a situation that requires immediate assistance. If there is any combat pilot on board, please make yourself known." A ripple of confusion swept through the passengers. Nervous laughter, whispers, disbelief. A combat pilot? On a commercial flight? But the captain's tone carried no trace of humor. A flight attendant, tall and composed though her eyes betrayed urgency, moved quickly down the aisle. She stopped at 8A, touched Mara's shoulder, and leaned close. "Ma'am," she whispered, voice unsteady. "The captain is asking if there's a combat pilot on board. Do you know of anyone?" Mara blinked awake, groggy, her instinct to deflect. That wasn't her anymore. She had promised herself she'd left that life behind. But then she saw the fear around her. Tight grips on armrests, murmured prayers, pale faces waiting for someone to step forward. The irony struck hard. She, the woman who had flown stealth missions through hostile skies, evaded missiles, and made calls that meant life or death, was now pretending to be nobody, just a passenger in 8A. But fate wasn't going to let her stay invisible. She could keep her head down, pretend it wasn't her burden. But what if no one else answered? The flight attendant's gaze lingered, almost searching her, as if she already knew. Mara drew in a breath, opened her mouth, then hesitated. Memories crashed into her. The thunder of S-16 engines under her command, the headset spitting orders, the flash of fire on the ground below. She had walked away from that life, but it had never really released its hold on her. And now, 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, Mara knew one truth. If she didn't step forward, this plane might never see its destination. She drew a slow breath. When she spoke, the authority she thought she'd buried laced every syllable. "I'm a pilot," she said quietly, then louder, steady. "I'm a combat pilot." Gasps rippled through the cabin. The businessman across the aisle stared. A teenage girl leaned in, eyes wide. The flight attendant's face flickered with relief, as if Mara had just handed her a lifeline. "Please, this way," the attendant whispered, guiding her toward the cockpit. Mara rose, pulse pounding, every gaze searing into her back as she moved down the narrow aisle. Her green sweater, meant for anonymity, now felt like a uniform she hadn't chosen to wear. Behind the reinforced door lay answers and dangers that no civilian on this flight could imagine. She walked steadily, even as her chest carried the weight of her past and the uncertainty of what awaited. When the keycard clicked and the door opened, the air shifted. Inside, warning lights pulsed, controls hummed, and the cockpit was a storm of motion. Both pilots looked pale, their hands flying over switches, headsets filled with static and clipped, frantic voices. On the central display, a red alert blinked in time with attention, autopilot failure. And worse, proximity alert. Her eyes darted to the radar. A blip was closing fast, too fast for normal air traffic. The captain turned, fear and relief battling in his expression. "Thank God you came forward. We've lost partial control, and we've got an unidentified aircraft shadowing us. Possibly hostile. Mara's instincts snapped sharp. She knew this dance. She'd flown these intercepts, tested nerves at the edge of airspace, watched standoffs spiral into catastrophe. And now the roles were reversed. The plane jolted with turbulence. Behind the sealed door, passengers gasped, oblivious to how close their fate balanced on one woman's comm. Her eyes scanned the instruments, muscle memory rising like a tide. The rhythms of command returned, the calculations, the sequences, the steadiness that separated survival from disaster. "Do you still have manual override?" she asked, voice steady. The captain nodded, gesturing to the controls. The first officer, pale and dazed, had nearly blacked out after a sudden, unexplained pressure spike. Mara slid into the co-pilot's seat, every nerve alive. It felt surreal, like she'd been sleepwalking for years, only to wake up here, in this moment. She gripped the yoke, the vibrations humming through her hands, machine and human joined once more. She whispered, almost to herself, "All right, girl. Let's see what you've still got." And with that, the fight she thought she'd left behind began again. Outside, the night sky stretched endless, the Atlantic a black void beneath them. Ahead, the unidentified aircraft loomed closer, its intermittent lights sending a chill through Mara. It didn't resemble a standard civilian jet, nor a clean-cut military design. It looked altered, irregular, built to intimidate. Her training whispered back to her. Briefings about shadow organizations flying unmarked planes to probe defenses, test reactions, sow fear. And now, behind her sat hundreds of civilians who had boarded expecting movies and sleep, unaware they were caught in the middle of what could become an international flashpoint. The captain hadn't exaggerated. The other craft's maneuvers, sweeping closer with each pass, were deliberate, calculated intimidation. She knew them well. She'd once flown them herself. The cockpit phone rang. The purser's voice shook. "Captain, passengers are panicking. What should we tell them?" Mara took the receiver. Her tone was steel. "Tell them only that we're handling it. Keep them calm." Panic spreads faster than fire. When she set the phone down, she caught the captain staring at her, half disbelief, half admiration. A woman who'd been asleep in 8A was now orchestrating survival at 30,000 feet. But Mara ignored his look. Her mind was already running calculations, distance, speed, angles, options. Then the radio crackled. A distorted voice, cold, synthetic. "Flight 417, you are off course. Prepare to comply." Mara froze. The accent was foreign but masked, the kind of digital distortion designed to erase origin. Leaning to the mic, she answered with calm authority. "This is a civilian aircraft en route to London. Identify yourself." The reply was the same, "Prepare to comply." On radar, the shadow plane slid across their nose, forcing the jet to veer or risk collision. A test of nerve. A game of chicken. But with hundreds of lives in her hands, recklessness wasn't an option. Mara eased the yoke just enough to avoid impact, refusing to surrender control entirely. "Not tonight," she whispered. "Not with all these people." This wasn't random harassment. Something larger was in play. Something that had found her specifically. The timing, the call for a combat pilot. It all felt orchestrated, not coincidence. The hostile aircraft banked again, streaking across their path like a predator circling prey. Mara's grip tightened. She knew this maneuver, a high-risk intimidation run. Her old instructor's voice rang in her head, "Hold steady, Dalton." Fear is their first weapon. So she forced her breath even, hiding the hammering in her chest. Weakness could not show, not to the captain, not to the passengers, and certainly not to whoever flew that shadow plane. The radio snapped alive once more. "You will follow coordinates transmitted now or face consequences." The captain's eyes went wide. On his console, new coordinates had appeared, injected into the system, overriding their flight plan. Mara's stomach sank. This wasn't harassment. It was a hijack, remote, technical, sophisticated. Whoever was behind it had breached their systems. That meant state backing or a network with the resources of one. The kind she'd once been briefed about in windowless rooms, names of leaders whispered alongside phrases like shadow war. And suddenly, a darker thought cut through her. This might not be about the plane at all. They might know exactly who was on board. Captain Mara Dalton, the combat pilot who'd walked away after a mission gone catastrophically wrong. A mission she never spoke of, but one that haunted her every night. Before she could process it, the plane lurched violently. Alarms shrieked. The hostile craft had passed so close the fuselage rattled. Trays crashed in the cabin, and the faint echo of screams bled through the sealed cockpit door. Mara steadied the controls with practiced calm, snapping at the captain. Lock out the false coordinates. Full manual now. Her voice carried such authority that he obeyed instantly. Together they wrenched the system free from sabotage, cutting autopilot completely, leaving only human hands to decide the jet's fate. But the victory was short-lived. The intercom blared again, not the hostile craft this time, but the cabin. A flight attendant's voice shrill with panic. Cockpit. Cockpit. 2 passengers are trying to break into the service compartment. They say they need control. They're armed. Mara's blood ran cold. That confirmed it. This wasn't harassment from the outside. There were operatives inside the plane, and they had chosen this moment of chaos to strike. Slamming the comm switch, she barked. Secure the cabin. Don't let them through. Delay them at any cost. We'll hold here. The captain's face went pale, whispering, "This is a hijacking." Mara shook her head, eyes hard as steel. No, this is worse. This is a coordinated operation, and we've flown right into it. As if on cue, the hostile aircraft surged forward, nose to nose with their jet. Mara caught her first clear look at its fuselage, unmarked metal, strange modifications, and then her breath caught. Etched faintly near the wing was a black insignia. She knew it instantly. Black Vulture. The rogue paramilitary group whispered about in briefings. Vanished years ago into the shadows. A group she had once fought directly, her last mission, the one that ended in disaster, civilians caught in crossfire, the guilt that drove her out of service. Now it all made sense. This wasn't about Flight 417. It was about her. Black Vulture had found her again. The realization burned hot through her veins. This wasn't just survival. This was unfinished war. Behind her, passengers prayed, unaware of the true scale of the threat. In the cabin, the planted operatives were met by sudden resistance. Ordinary travelers rising with desperate courage, wrestling them down before they could breach the cockpit. And Mara, gripping the yoke, made her move. She forced the jet into a steep dive, throwing the shadow plane off balance, ocean waves rushing up to meet them, then pulled hard, skimming just above the Atlantic before cutting sharp across its tail. A hostile craft vanished into the dark, retreating like a phantom swallowed by the void. Silence hung in the cockpit. The captain's breath came ragged as he whispered, awe in his voice. "You saved us." But Mara only shook her head, eyes locked on the horizon. She knew this was no ending, only a pause. Yet as dawn broke over the curve of the earth and London appeared faint on the radar, she allowed herself the smallest breath of relief. "Not today," she murmured. Handing back the controls, she slipped quietly toward the cabin. Passengers stared at her like she was something beyond human, but Mara only wanted to vanish back into seat 8A, to disappear into her green sweater, close her eyes, and pretend to be anonymous once more. Because she knew the war she thought she had left behind hadn't ended. It had only found a new battlefield, high above the skies.